Hi everyone, my name is Snoot, at least that's what it says on my driver's license, and I am the community manager for Coffee Stain Studios. And in this video, we're going to be answering a couple of questions that you guys had. So I posted on Twitter, Facebook, Steam, and Reddit if you guys had any questions that we would bring up in this video today. We haven't done like a Q&A thing on the YouTube side for a long time. We do answer questions every week on our Twitch stream. So we have a weekly dev stream and there's a segment in that stream where I usually answer questions. So I decided to post this and ask if you guys had any questions, and geez, you had a lot of questions. We're not gonna be able to get around to all the questions, unfortunately, in this video, because I think that would make this video never ending. But yeah, I'm gonna try and answer as many questions as I can. So before I dive into the Q&A section, let's talk quickly about actually a couple of questions you guys had on Update 8 specifically. So let's address the state of dev real quick first before we head into the Q&A segment. So I think the first question to answer is, when is Update 8 coming out? So right now we are working on the hopefully final push on our experimental branch with Update 8 before we feel like we are ready to like sort of finalize it and release it on the early access branch. If you watched the video I put out a couple of weeks ago where I talked about like why we're doing it this way and sort of what we're working on right now, that video is still sort of like valid, but we have progressed a bit further now. Of course, we're still working on it, but we don't have like a good estimate as to like when we will be ready to release this patch on experimental. We believe it will be sometime in October. But we can't really say too much more so than that, because right now what we've done is upgraded the engine to 5.2, which we have done, and we resolved most of those issues. We're also working towards implementing a refactor of our online subsystem that's also supposed to go in Update 8. And we kind of need to do that now as well, because this is the best time to do it. And there's still a bunch of work left on that side. So we are progressing quite well, but there's still a bunch of work left, and there's still a bunch of testing left that we need to do internally before we can release it on the experimental branch. And then once it's out on the experimental branch, sometime in October, it'll probably take like a couple of weeks before it's ready to be able to ship away to the early access branch. And we'll talk more like as the time comes, I think, and give you more news as to like what's going on. But that's the state of things right now. All right, I got a couple of questions here that we're just gonna like, these are classic questions that I've constantly getting, and I've answered these a bunch of times before in the past, but let's just do a real quick speedrun of these before we dive into like the other questions that I have here. When is 1.0 coming out? We don't know for sure. There's still a bunch of work left, but we are closing in on 1.0. This is sort of the effort that we've been doing the last couple of updates. It's trying to like wrap up the game for 1.0, and this is the goal. We're not gonna stick around in early access for forever. We do wanna finish the game to be ready in some form of like 1.0 state. But as to like exactly when that will be, we don't know for sure. I think we'll have a better understanding of that once Update 8 is out of the way. I think Update 8 took a bit longer than we expected to do, so it's always hard to like give you an estimate as to like when 1.0 will be ready, but we are working towards it, so hopefully not too long in the future. When can I use mercer spheres and sommersloops? So mercer spheres and sommersloops are part of the story element that we're developing for the game, and the story element of the game is going to come in 1.0. Also good to point out that the story mode for Satisfactory is not going to be some grand campaign or anything like that. Like, don't expect like a Call of Duty campaign, shoot a man. It's gonna be like an optional thing. Like the main part of Satisfactory is the main gameplay that you have right now. What we're gonna add with the story is like a little bit of a couple of story elements sprinkled in with the existing gameplay, and also sort of like a goal that you're working towards with the game. But this is gonna be like sort of optional. So, you know, if you just enjoy playing Satisfactory just for the sake of building factories, then you can totally skip the story if you want to. Or if you're interested in that, you can do it. But that's just sort of how it is. Any idea when SAM ore is going to be used? SAM ore is going to be used in the 1.0 release along with the story elements. When is the story coming to the game? In 1.0. Console release, when? We currently don't have any plans for console release. I think this is something that we'll sort of dive into maybe if we can do console even when we're done with the game, so closer to 1.0. So we'll see if we do console release. Right now we don't have plans for that, but we'll see in the future. Are you going to add base defense? No. Are you going to add factory maintenance? No. Survival elements? No. Green energy? No. Terraforming? No. Golf? No. So the answer to those questions are that we're not going to add these things to Satisfactory. It's not that type of game that we're making. If you want a more like in-depth explanation about why we're not adding these things, then check out the video in one of the corners. I'm not sure which corner it is actually right now, where Jace talks about these things as to why they're not coming in and give you more of an in-depth explanation as to why we're not adding these things to Satisfactory. All right, speedrun done. New best PB. All right, let's go into some of the questions that you guys have on the socials, and let's dive into it. Is it possible to add a way to enable advanced game modes on games already going and disable them? So yes, you can actually enable this on saves that you already have. You do this when you load save files. So when you load a save file, there's a little check mark underneath the load button that you can click to enable, and then when you load your save file, you'll have sort of advanced game modes settings be like enable on that save file. And then when you save that save file, it will be enabled. But you can't go back. And the reason why we decided not to set this up is because we sort of want you to still experience the game in the way that we've designed it, but we still want players to have the option to enable like being able to build without cost and be able to fly and all that stuff. But if we felt like, if it was just like in a menu where you just like give yourself items if you felt like it without any repercussions really, then we felt like it sort of ruins sort of the game design balance that we have, and it might make it so that people sort of take the easy way out in a lot of cases instead of like playing the game we designed it for. There's a saying in game design where if you can optimize away the fun out of a game, then players will always do that. So we needed to add a little bit of friction so that people wouldn't just like enable these things all the time and just like get that shit out of it. And I think this is a fair solution to that problem, sort of. So like, if you want to be able to do that stuff, you can totally, but your save file will be sort of marked as a creative save file, essentially. How would you feel about adding VR to the game? I'm gonna be honest, we don't really have any interest in adding VR to the game. There's no one at the company that are like super into VR, and just by that fact alone makes it so it's hard to like push for that, so to speak. If someone were interested at the company to like implement VR, then maybe we'd look more into it, but I don't think it's really interesting for us to look at. So the answer is unfortunately no, but maybe we'll change our minds in the future or something, I don't know, but this is the state of things are right now. Would you add a snow biome to the game? No, no. It's taken us so long and we're not even done with the map. The like addition of a new biome at this point is too much work, so we probably won't do it. Maybe as like a DLC or something in the future, who knows? I don't know, saying we're gonna do that, but at the moment, no snow, no. Is there a chance that clipping stuff, for example, placing a foundation partly rotated overlapping another foundation, won't make textures flicker in the future? Unfortunately, this isn't something that we can actually remove because this is like an inherent issue with how rendering sort of works with in regards to computer graphics. When you're drawing stuff on the screen, the way you sort of decide like what's in front of what on the screen, we use there's a buffer in the shader that's called a depth buffer, which writes like each pixel gives that like a value. And sometimes you can end up in a situation where like between frames, the values are so close to each other that like it doesn't know from frame to frame like what it should have been displaying in front of what. That flickering is essentially that going on, where like things are really close to each other, and like in certain situations it doesn't know like which one should it render on top of which one because the values are so close. And there's no good solution to get rid of that. We have added a couple of like workarounds where we offset things slightly to get around from that, but we can't get rid of that issue fully, unfortunately. But we can add more of these kind of like nitpicky situations, but it depends on the material and stuff like that. So unfortunately we can't fully get rid of it, but hopefully we can make it a little bit better in the future. What should I do to stop my fellow multiplayer friends trying to build like Let's Game It Out? Get new friends. I don't know. It's either you have to like embrace that, or you have to be like really restrictive and be like, stop doing that. I don't know. I don't have a good answer to this question, actually. This is like, just embrace it, I guess. If you're playing multiplayer, then you're playing multiplayer. If you don't want people to screw around, then maybe play single player. That's how I feel, at least. Because like, whenever I play multiplayer, I get a little bit frustrated when people are just like putting shit down, hand together, and I'm like, I just want it this way. So when I do play multiplayer, I tend to just like run away and do my own thing and then hook up to like a main base or something. That's what I do, at least. Is it possible to have more than 4 players in multiplayer mode? Officially, no, but technically, yes. So the game officially supports up to 4 players because that's sort of how we've optimized the game for in terms of like networking and stuff like that. But there is a way, okay? And it's not super tricky. So if you Google like how to access more players in Satisfactory or like how to have more than 4 players in Satisfactory, there's a config file in the install structure where we just like hard set a value, like how many people can join a session. You can set that to whatever you want. And that way you can have as many people on the save as you want, essentially, but you do so on your own risk because we don't officially support more than 4, but you can totally do it if you want to. A train X starts at A at 4 p.m. and reaches B at 5 p.m., while another train, Y, starts from B at 4 p.m. and reaches A at 5:30 p.m. At what time will the 2 trains cross? All right, so let's assume that the distance between A and B, here, A, B, we'll denote that distance as D. So train X starts from A and goes to B between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m., which means that it takes 1 hour for the train to travel from A to B. And we can denote the speed of that train being that it travels D kilometers per hour for train X. Train Y starts from B and goes to A, and it goes from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., which means that it takes 1.5 hours for train B to travel. And for us to calculate the speed of that train, this is assuming that the trains are traveling at the constant speed, by the way. So to calculate the speed of train Y, we need to do distance divided by the time it takes, which is 1.5 hours, which is the same as saying 3 divided by 2. Which you can also write as 2 divided by 3 times d kilometers per hour. So now that we have the speed the trains are traveling in, we need to calculate the time it takes for trains to travel to a certain distance. So let's call t time, okay? So in order to calculate like how far a train travels in time, we can do the first train X, and that's quite simple because it's just traveling in a ratio to 1:1. So it's traveling in a distance times t. Kilometers. That's how far the train X will travel in time. The other train, it's similar thing. So it's the new value here, 2 divided by 3 d times t is how many kilometers train Y will travel at a certain time. So one property of this problem too is that when the 2 trains cross, they will both have traveled the sum of the total distance, and we can write that as equation that is dt plus 2 divided by 3 dt equals d. So now that we have the equation, we can solve for t to figure out when they meet. So dt plus 2 divided by 3 dt equals d. You can simplify this as writing it as 5 over 3 dt equals d. To get rid of the 5 divided by 3 d, we divide by that on both sides, which gives us t equals d divided by 5 divided by 3 d. When you have the same numerator and denominator, you can get rid of that, which gives us t equals 1 divided by 5 divided by 3. And this is the same as saying t equals 3 divided by 5. So now we have t, and 3 divided by 5 is 0.6. Equals 0.6. So this is how many hours it takes. It takes 0.6 hours for the 2 trains to meet. And 0.6, if you want to get this in minutes, you do 0.6 times 60, which is 36 minutes. So the 2 trains will meet, they started at 4 p.m. So the trains will meet at 4:36 p.m. Why do the mining nodes not align with the world grid? So the reason why they don't is because when we started working on this game, we didn't anticipate having a world grid. This is something that we added after the fact. And we don't want to move the nodes at this point because it can really mess up a lot for people's saves. So I don't know if we'll have a solution for this problem where like the nodes don't align with world grid coordinates and stuff like that. But that's sort of why they don't align right now, is because that wasn't a thing when we added the nodes. Will there ever be round-shaped foundations or angled walls? So at the moment, we don't really have plans for this. And that's not to say that we can do that if we have time for that, but there's a lot of stuff that we're working on. So we're always like constantly prioritizing like what to work on next. And it's possible we have time to add this for 1.0 maybe. If you guys really want this, then please voice that opinion on our QA site, questions.satisfactorygaming.com, because we do sort of, when we're deciding on what to do, we sort of evaluate based on what's been upvoted on the QA site and what we're hearing in the community. So yeah, if there's like an outroar that we need that, then we'll consider it. But at the moment, we don't have plans for it. So we'll see what happens in the future. Since there are a handful of buildings that are not symmetrical, will we ever be able to flip buildings like in Captain of Industry? We don't currently have plans for that. And I don't really have a good reason as to why. We just don't have plans to do that because it entails a lot of work that we don't feel really adds too much to the game at the moment. So, and it's not just a thing that we can just like whip out and have it working. There's actually a lot of work involved in making sure that works fine. So kudos to them for doing it, but at the moment we don't plan to do it. What is a bug that you have had during development that seemed easy to fix at first but was pretty difficult to fix, and why? There are a ton of those actually, surprisingly. One bug that I worked on, for instance, that I thought was easy to fix but wasn't, was to change it so that when you have the object scanner and you scan for like berries and you pick up a berry, that it wouldn't scan the same berry again. That was a hassle and I never actually managed to fix it. But I believe we did fix it at some point, so it might be in the game. Or maybe it's not, I don't know. But I asked the other programmers and I had a couple of honorable mentions here. So one that comes to mind is the typo that was coal in the scanner, where the C in the coal wasn't capitalized. That was apparently a pain in the ass to fix because it wasn't like handled properly for the translation system that we have in the game. So that was apparently a real head scratcher. And another honorable mention is the hub part keeping coming back and duplicating and shit like that. We really thought that would be easy to fix, but it was not. So, and I don't think we've actually fixed that yet. So there you go. Now that Unreal Engine 5.3 is out, will you update the engine version again? It's funny because like, I think a day or two before we released the video where I mentioned that we are gonna update to like Unreal Engine 5.2, 5.3 came out. Good timing. Typically, we don't really want to update to a new engine version where like the first patch comes out for a new engine version, but I believe the next one is out anyways, but we'll have to see. I don't think at the moment we think it's urgent enough to do it, but we'll see if it's worth it or not. I think like theoretically it's always good to update the engine version, have the latest version, because they are doing a good job at like updating the engine. But at the moment there's like nothing that really warrants us to like do the next step and do 5.3 before we release this patch. So at the moment we're not planning for it, but it's too early to say, honestly. Maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't. But there are no like real big features in Unreal Engine 5.3 that we really want to utilize, like for instance nanite and landscape and stuff like that. Like that's not something that we feel like we need at the moment. Same goes with like putting a nanite on foliage. That's also not something that we feel that we need at the moment. It's not gonna automatically make the game run better or look better just from the box. So it needs to warrant sort of the work that goes into updating the engine, and we'll see if we do that or not, essentially. The only thing I could say is that update 8 will be 5.2. That's the engine version we'll be rolling an update with. Has the upgrade to Unreal Engine 5 increased the planned scope of the game, or has it remained the same? This one is quite tricky to answer, I think, because I don't think it has increased the planned scope of the game. It's definitely given us an opportunity to do more tech art stuff that we weren't able to do before. So in that sense, it's increased the scope a little bit. And it's also limited us a little bit because I don't know if you guys realize this, but rain has been disabled in update because the implementation we had for rain doesn't work in the new engine version. So we need to like completely from scratch make a new rain system. I haven't seen too many people notice this, to be honest. So I don't think it's too bad that we're taking our time with that, and we'll see what happens with that. But I don't know if there's no like feature for the game that we can't do because we're not in Unreal Engine 5 or 4, you know? I don't know. I think we're setting us up better for the future when it comes to the tech of the engine, to be able to optimize the game and that stuff. I think that's better. But as to like scope of the game, I think it's pretty much the same. If you would have known how challenging upgrading to Unreal Engine 5 would be, would you still have done it? Oh boy, I think you're gonna get a different answer depending on who you ask at the studio, honestly. I think there's been a lot of good gains from Unreal Engine 5, but also some downsides with it, both from like what the game can do, but also what we can do with the game, so to speak. I think overall it's been, my own personal belief is I think it's a good thing to update because Epic are so good at like maintaining the work that they do. It's been good for us historically to like keep the engine updated and keep being on like sort of the latest version of the engine, just because we get so many good tools and so many good like opportunities to improve the game. So I think in the long run it will be worth it. But there's been a lot of friction, and like I said, I think you'll get a different answer from different people in the studio who you ask. I think if you wait like a little bit more, maybe more people would be more prone to say it was worth the effort. But we're still knee deep in it, so it's you know, that's sort of how it is. What inspired you to make this game? So I wasn't there from the beginning, so I can't really say fully, but we were definitely inspired by Factorio, and we were curious like what would Factorio be if we made it sort of as like a 3D type game, where like what challenges would that third axis add to the game, and like what could we do differently with this game? Like, and I think we've come a long way since then, and I don't think really the two games are comparable. I think there are different aspects of Factorio that are really good that wouldn't have worked so well in Satisfactory, and vice versa. But Factorio was like one of the main inspirations, definitely, for making this game. Are there any plans to include larger blueprint designers? We are quite happy with the size of the blueprint designer that as it is right now. It sort of serves the purpose that we were after, which was not to just make factories being faster to build, which they are faster to build if you set up the blueprint designer correctly. But we also wanted to add like a little element of like, you know, a little bit of a puzzle where people had to figure out like how to adapt their blueprints to make sense in the designer so they can also use them in their factories. So it wouldn't just be like a, you know, copy and paste of factories you already built, because we feel like that would have taken out a big portion of the game. As for like the size of the blueprint designer right now, we're not against changing it, but I think right now we're quite happy with it. And given the feedback we've gotten so far, it seems like it's actually a pretty decent size, but we'll see what we do in the future if we change our minds or whatever. Like, that's happened before, so I guess we'll see what happens. What's the situation with the Mk3 Miner? Okay, so the Mk3 Miner at the moment, if you overclock it, it can technically give you more ore that you can transport on the belts at the moment. And a lot of people have been asking like, what are you gonna do about that? Are you gonna add like another output to the miner, or are there gonna be faster belt speeds or something like that? Okay, so we have a solution to this problem, but I'm not gonna tell you what it is just yet. There is a solution to this problem, so don't worry about it. Yeah, you guys are gonna have to wait until 1.0 to find out. How are you gonna change the Uranium Fuel Unit alternate recipe so it doesn't use beacons in a way that won't break existing nuclear setups? So, if you guys don't know, we have beacons in the game. We've had beacons for a long time, and in update 6, 7, they all blend together. Whatever, we decided to remove them from the game and replace them with the new marker system that we have for the map. But there was the whole thing where you needed beacons for one of the alt recipes, so we decided to keep the item in the game, but whenever you place it, it will convert to the new marker system. And we kept them in the game because we felt like it would ruin too many factory layouts at the moment. And to be honest, the answer to that question is it will break nuclear setups, unfortunately, once we fully get rid of beacons in the game. But it won't break fully. I think there will be some leeway for you guys to adjust your recipes somewhat easily. But don't really have any news as to like what exact changes are coming. Actually, this is a really good segue into the next question, which is, will you rebalance any of the recipes in the game for 1.0? And the answer to that is yes. I can't give you like exact news as to what these changes will be, because we actually don't fully know what those changes will be. We haven't decided all of that, and then we also haven't tested the balances internally yet. But there's gonna be some sort of rebalance for the game at some point. So just so you guys are aware of that. The balancing changes won't like break your save files, in the sense that like you will still be able to load your save files, but your factory layouts like will have issues and stuff like that, which you will have to fix. I believe most of the rebalancing stuff is for the later tiers. So like, I think, I can't give a exact number, but like up until like the more later tiers, things will probably much stay the same, but yeah, at the later tiers, things will change a little bit, balancing wise. Will there ever be Mark 3 or Mark 4 fluid pipes? No, because we're sort of at the limit with Mark 2. Actually, even with Mark 2, it doesn't fully work. There's a couple of like edge cases where sometimes you can get a little bit less than 600. Like you can't always expect to get full like 600 out of the pipes. And this is based on like a bunch of factors like frame rate and stuff like that. And we hope to fix that stuff for Mark II pipes so that they will be fully 600. I don't think you need to worry too much about this unless you're optimizing like perfectly 100% utilizing pipes. But in the future, this shouldn't be an issue. But the addition of a Mark III and 4 is right out. That's not happening. Are you planning to add a logic system? And if so, when? We don't have plans to add a logic system to the game. We actually played around a little bit with this idea, and we decided not to do it because we feel like Satisfactory is already a pretty complicated game, and it's quite complex. And we always wanted Satisfactory to sort of be sort of easy to grasp and like get into, and then like sort of hard to manage and like once to master, and like once you get into the later tiers and stuff like that. And we felt that like having a logic system would add too much to like the already existing game, because the existing game is already quite complex. If we were thinking of, okay, but what if it's optional? Then it's like, then we're putting a lot of effort into adding a system, a quite big system that wouldn't even necessarily be compulsory for the game. And that makes it not really worth implementing for us at this time. So that's why we're not probably gonna do a logic system anytime soon. There are mods that have implemented really cool logic systems to the game that do require you being able to program, I believe, but there are some really cool mods that sort of fill this void, and I recommend checking those out if you're interested in that stuff. When do you think you'll release the original soundtrack? So I can actually, I don't know if we've said this actually, but we plan to release the original soundtrack with the 1.0 release. We always wanted to release the soundtrack, and there's been a couple of reasons why we haven't done that. One of the main reasons was because of licensing stuff that needed to be sorted out, but we have sorted that out, I believe. And the other thing is that if we add more music, which I think we are gonna add, I think we're gonna add more music to the game, then we would want that to be included in the soundtrack, of course. And we can always add music to soundtracks after the fact and like append them to it, but it felt more reasonable, I feel like, for us to just like wait until 1.0 and then release the soundtrack along with that release. So that's the plan at the moment. Will we get more lights to illuminate our factories? We don't currently have plans to add more lights, but we might change our minds. It depends. We are a bit hesitant to add more lights to the game because lights are a pretty big factor as to why you're getting significant frame rate drops. It's been a really tricky problem to solve, adding lights to the game, and we put a lot of effort into making sure that the game is as optimized as it can get with the lights that we have at the moment. And the idea of adding more lights and making it easier to build them and stuff like that is kind of scary, but it's not impossible, I guess, and maybe we'll do that, but at the moment we don't really have any plans. But like I said, we might change our mind. We might change our mind on a lot of this stuff. I'm curious what you mean when you say you don't officially support Lumen. If it's in the game, does that mean that you support it? So this is a really good point, and this is actually something that we've discussed a lot back and forth when we added Lumen to the game. For those who don't know, we have support for the one of the new techniques for global elimination that Unreal Engine supports, which is Lumen. We decided to add that in the game, but the thing is that you sort of need to tailor the lighting system towards Lumen if you have that in your games. And we haven't really done that. We haven't really tailored the game for Lumen in mind, which means you get like a lot of dark areas and like the exposure is kind of weird in certain situations. And it's a lot of work tuning the lighting towards that. But we felt that like it's such a cool feature and it doesn't really like break anything by having it. So we felt that like if people want to enable Lumen, they can, and like if it works for them, then cool, and if it doesn't work, then they can switch it off. But we decided to go with the whole thing where we say it's not officially supported because we don't officially support it. Like if people are running into issues, then we can't really help them out. And if like they're having issues with like graphic card not being able to support Lumen, we also can't really do anything about that. And also the phrasing, the wording here with saying it's like not officially supported, so that people know that like, okay, the game isn't designed with Lumen in mind. So that's the main reason why we went with that. But it is true, like the fact that it is in the game is kind of like signifying that it is supported, but we still want to be able to communicate sort of our intention with Lumen, and that is that the game isn't tuned with Lumen in mind, and we don't know if we'll ever tune the game with Lumen in mind. All right, that's it for this video. It took a long time to record this, so hopefully it makes sense. hopefully. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was informational, and hope you have a good weekend. All right, see you everyone, bye.